Well, thank you. I'm Roy Jensen. I had the privilege of moderating session 4, which really focused on oversight and coverage of integrated diagnostics. And as a result, we really had a fair amount of diversity of approaches on this. And of course, the first talk was given by Dr. Tai, where she really talked about the ethical issues around algorithm development. And I think what turned out to be a pretty common theme of the overall workshop was the fact that these algorithms are susceptible to being prone to introducing bias, and that I think one of the things that Dr. Tai really emphasized is that we need to be thinking about these issues from the get-go and make sure that we're testing these algorithms against diverse and inclusive populations from the very beginning. The second talk was given by Dr. LaPosada, who had lots of practical advice in terms of developing integrative diagnostics. And I think one of the lessons that I took away from this is perhaps we should think carefully about how we approach this problem and to make sure that we sort of take it in bite-sized chunks. And I think the idea that, they started off with, coagulation and really got their arms around that, brought the right experts to the table, and took a very all-inclusive approach as far as the multidisciplinary team focusing on a problem that they could solve, and I think there's a pretty good lesson there. The third talk was from Dr. Philip at the FDA, and I think that talk to me emphasized the fact that a lot of the technology that's being developed is really being evaluated and regulated by pretty traditional approaches that the FDA has taken. And I think that there's going to be an opportunity there, which we'll talk about it in the next slide about how to address that. And then the last talk was given by Dr. Malin, and I think my main takeaway there was that, frankly, from the payer side, there seems to be a reticence to engage in paying for integrative diagnostics as kind of a standalone component of medical care. And she talked about the fact that perhaps this issue could be addressed once bundled payments are implemented for oncology care. Now, in terms of the policies, I think, again, I just focused on each of the main point from each of the talks. I believe that, we really have to start now to make sure that our clinical trials and our institutions as a whole really focus on the issues of diversity and inclusion. I suspect that a lot of the integrative diagnostic and AI solutions are going to be done on retrospective cohorts, which mean that we really need to make sure that we have the right mix of our population in these databases now, because it's much harder to fix later on down the line. And actually, the talk this morning from Dr. Barzilay, prompted, I think, a suggestion that we could start building diverse databases right now to evaluate AI solutions and to be working on making sure that they're not biased, as a first step in the process. And then as we bring integrative diagnostic solutions to the clinic, we use those populations to evaluate their lack of bias and their appropriateness for as diverse a populations as possible. I think an opportunity that came out of Dr. LaPosada's talk is that this idea of taking the integrative diagnostics problem and sort of dividing it into bite-sized chunks could potentially be a way for funding agencies such as the NIH to fund the development of diagnostic management teams and focusing on these problems that have a scale which lends themselves to folks coming together to really developing an appropriate AI tool would make a lot of sense to me, and it would be a way to move the field forward. In terms of the regulation of these devices, I really think that now is the time to consider a group to meet with FDA leadership and see whether or not there might be a better way to develop a regulatory pathway for this type of software. I'm not sure that the techniques that and the kind of the buckets at FDA that were developed in the 80s and 90s and in the early aughts is appropriate for the evaluation of these new technologies coming on, and I think there should be some serious consideration to adapting to the new environment. And then, frankly, just picking up on a point that Randy made earlier, I think we desperately need national health care, frankly. I've never seen a problem in medicine solved by private payers. If there's an example out there, I'm open to taking a look at it, but 99 times out of 100 at a minimum, they always stand as an impediment to moving things forward. And so there you have it.